Seattle Seahawks general manager John Schneider has some heavy lifting to do over the next few months and some big decisions to make. A lot of young players, key players, foundational players on this roster up for unrestricted free agency or eligible for contract extensions. And we saw the first one of those handed out yesterday. Charles Cross signing that big 4-year, $104+ million deal, locking him up for the next 5 years beyond this one because it's tacked on to the 5th-year option. So tonight I asked the question, who's next? Who's in line to get the next big deal? Some of them not so certain. So I've got 3 big ones for you today that I think are the most important, maybe the biggest questions facing John Schneider. And then, you know what? Just because I like to give you guys a little extra, I threw in a couple of honorable mention extras as well. So we're really going to talk about 5 of the young Seahawks eligible for and in line next for big paydays from the Seahawks. Who's it going to be? We'll talk about it next, coming up on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Thanks for being here, you guys. It's been a hot minute since I've had to try and figure out how to manage a bye week for the Seahawks. In fact, the last time they had one of these, well, I wasn't doing a podcast, so I didn't have to worry about it from that standpoint. But I'm not going to take any days off. I'm not going to take my foot off the pedal. We've got some great shows lined up for you this week, including Be Here Tomorrow. And by tomorrow, depending on when you're watching this video, I say is Tuesday. All of the boys from the Seahawkers pod are going to be joining me tomorrow night. That's Adam Emmert and Brandon Schultz and Clinton Bonner from the Seahawkers pod. They're going to join me tomorrow. And you know what? Screw it. Let's go live with that. It's going to be 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern. We'll get their thoughts on everything we saw this season, how it matched up with their expectations, reminisce a little bit about that 49ers win, and talk about what they think they see happening the rest of the way in the playoffs. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you haven't checked out the Sleeper app yet, you absolutely should. It's the best sports app out there for a million reasons, not just football, every other sport as well. You can play fantasy football. You can pick games. You can play daily fantasy sports, or you can follow along with games in the best real-time play-by-play format that's out there. You can actually, what am I trying to say? I'm speechless. It's so great. I'm speechless. You can actually react to each and every one of those plays with emojis, but you can also chat with the rest of the community that's in there. And when it comes to games of skill, Sleeper is the best. You just pick more or less on some of those prop games, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. And if that is your game, now's the best time to join. They're going to give you $20, as you can see right there, just for signing up. No deposit required. But if you want to make a deposit, they're going to match your first one up to $100, 100%. Terms and conditions apply, legal in 27 states. Check out the Sleeper app today and use that promo code FOREVER to get both of these deals. All right, you guys. So it's this time of year that the Seahawks have done some long-term deals before. And it makes a lot of sense. If you woke up today and you went on overthecap.com, or you woke up yesterday, I should say, and you checked the Seahawks salary cap space, you would see that they had about $17 million available this year. Now, what do you do with that? Does it go to waste? No. There's a couple of different ways that's going to be absorbed that doesn't get talked about a lot. First of all, you can roll over anything left over from this year's salary cap space into next year. But some of that will be taken up by incentives. There are young players. There's a program that exists in the NFL that if you play at a level and you produce at a level that exceeds your rookie contract, and they have a formula to figure all that out, you make some extra money. Like Riq Woolen has made some pretty significant extra money because he has been a full-time starter since his rookie year and exceeded his 5th-round rookie contract. So some of it will get absorbed by that. But the Seahawks used some of it yesterday when they signed Charles Cross. The way it's structured, it's actually, there's a reason that they did it now instead of waiting until the offseason, because they can take on some of that cap hit now. And Curtis Allen, good friend of the show. You read his stuff over at Seahawks Draft Blog with Rob Staten over there. Great numbers guy. And he put out a projection out there, an estimate. We may not see the actual official numbers and structure of Charles Cross's contract for a week or two. The Seahawks are as tight as any team in the league at letting those details get out there. But based on precedent and other contracts he's seen and his knowledge of how the Seahawks like to structure deals with John Schneider and Joey Lane making those calls, the Seahawks actually project to have a cap hit in 2026 from Charles Cross of about $10 million. If they had just let him play on the fifth-year option, it was going to be a little bit over $17 million, about 17.5. So they actually saved themselves some 2026 cap space by making this move. Are there any others that we might see in the next week or two or early in the offseason before we get to free agency? There's a strategy involved here. Some teams are better at this than others. And some teams are better at it, but it might end up kicking them in the ass at some point. If you extend a player earlier than you have to, then you're jumping ahead of the market is the intention there. One example of this is the Detroit Lions. They extended Jamison Williams, gave him a big number, even though he's not wide receiver one there, and did it well before they had to. Well before the end of his rookie contract. But in doing so, maybe 2 years from now, we look back and we realize that they saved themselves some money because, first of all, that it's a statement of their belief in the player, but also where they think the market's going to go. Remember, the salary cap goes up every year significantly, and also so do free agent contracts. So we'll see how that works out. The other end of the spectrum are the Dallas Cowboys, who just never seemed to get anything done early. They kept kicking the can down the road with Dak Prescott and franchising him over and over again. All that does is jack the average annual value up. They did the same thing with Micah Parsons. And honestly, it ultimately cost them that player. Then you see teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the exact opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to this, to the extreme. They extend their young players way before they need to, and they extend them way out in the future, and they're very aggressive in using void years. If you go and check out and play around on overthecap.com and look at Philadelphia Eagles future cap responsibilities, go ahead and click forward to like 2030, 30 and 31 and 32. Like there's some money there already. They're already eating into that cap space. Now the Seahawks are kind of in the middle of all this. They like to keep their contracts short. John Schneider, in a perfect world, would like to sign every single player to a 3-year deal. But certain premium positions require more. Left tackle is one of those. That's why Cross got the 4-year deal. I would expect when the time comes to extend Jackson Smith and Jigba, that might very likely be a 5-year deal. But they like to do these shorter deals, a lot of money up front, let the player make cash the first 2 years, and then it allows for flexibility either to move on from the player if he's not productive, but it's also a selling point these days in free agency with as aggressive as teams are in moving on from players sometimes, even though they have a lot of money left on their deal. This 3-year deal thing is appealing to a lot of players, not all, but a lot of them, because it gives them the opportunity. You can present to them like, hey, you're going to be able to hit free agency again before you turn 30 years old. That's a pretty valuable sales pitch. So I have put together a list of 3 players that I think are the most pivotal. And by that, I mean, there's questions about whether the Seahawks want to pay them market value to bring them back. And then I've got 2 more that I didn't include in my main 3 because I think they're kind of givens. I'm assuming they're going to be extended and brought back. And that's why I didn't include them in the initial 3. Okay. So first one, Kobe Bryant. And the reason I list him first, there are 2 of them. One is we know how important the safety position is to Mike McDonald and his defensive scheme. We also know that the team approached Bryant before the season. This came out after the Seahawks were able to lock Abe Lucas up to a 3-year extension. And they made Kobe a legitimate offer. Kobe turned it down, betting on himself. See if I can get something else in free agency. Remember, the first 2 years in the league, he still played corner. He was a corner at Cincinnati. He won the Jim Thorpe Award as the best cornerback in college football, then makes the transition to safety. We loved what we saw from him last year, but this was a really shrewd move, I think, on Bryant's part to say, hey, another year in this Mike Macdonald defense, now that we have the continuity coming back from year one, all these returning starters, it's going to make me look better. I'm going to go put a good season on tape. I'm going to make more money by saying no, and that's what he did. 7 career interceptions, as you can see. Now, potential contract, I'm going to do that for each one of these. 3 years, $42 million with about $25 million guaranteed. Where do I come up with that? It's what Quentin Lake just signed in LA with the Rams a week ago. And is Quentin Lake better than Kobe Bryant? They're the same age. They're coming off their rookie deal. Bryant has more interceptions. Lake has more tackles. I think that's the comp. And I think Kobe Bryant, when he saw that Lake deal last week, is feeling pretty good about his decision to not sign a contract early. Now, with each of these, I'll also tell you how I feel about each of the situations. And here's where I stand on Kobe. I like him a lot as a player. I think he's a great fit for Mike Macdonald's defense. He exhibits every quality that John Schneider likes in a Seahawk player. He's a hard worker. He's humble. He's a great teammate. I would love for Kobe Bryant to spend the next 4, 5, 6 years of his career here in Seattle. But if he becomes a victim of the dollar sign, because that's the market now, that would be more than Julian Love is getting paid. Do you think Kobe Bryant's a better player than Julian Love? Do you think he deserves to be paid more on this team than Julian Love? But here's the other thing. Love's been banged up this year, and Kobe missed the last game. Last 2 games? Ty Okada's legitimate. I think Ty Okada's better. He can play both spots. He can play them both well. He's a year or 2 younger, and he still has 1 year beyond this year of team control. He was a restricted free agent. The team can just put a tender on him and pay him that amount for 1 more year. It would be a lot less of a cap hit than a big new deal for Kobe Bryant. I think this is one of those situations where the Seahawks will take another run at him at their number that they're comfortable with. And if he says no, they let him test the market. If he gets to the market, he's going to make more money than I think the Seahawks are willing to pay him, and he walks, and I'm okay with that. And here's the reason that I think that's going to happen. Yesterday, after news of this broke, Greg Bell posted it, of course, the great beat writer from the Tacoma News Tribune. All the beat writers posted this when it happened. But Bell got a question almost immediately from a Seahawk fan, like, who's next? Is it Riq or Ken Walker? And here is Greg Bell's answer. He said Kobe Bryant. He's pretty locked in there. He's pretty tied into that organization. So we'll see if Greg's prediction is true. The next one up is Kenneth Walker. And this one's I've gone back and forth on it. If you watch my show, you know. And you probably feel the same way. The issues with Walker leading up to this year were twofold. One, can't stay healthy. No severe injuries. We're not talking Rashad Penny here. More like CJ Prosise. Like, it's an ankle sprain here. It's a hamstring pull here or a quad. This year he's played all 17 games. I mean, they had to baby him. They had to manage him through training camp. And back then I sensed some frustration, some annoyance from Mike Macdonald and even Clint Kubiak. There was that kind of infamous interview that Kubiak was doing. I think it was with Seattle Sports 710, where they asked him about the qualities he looks for in a running back. And he immediately said availability. And then he talked about Zach Charbonnet and how he's ready to go every day. I thought that was a swipe at Walker. And then through the first 80% of the season, we saw this weird kind of timeshare with he and Charbonnet, even though there were indications leading up to like the week 15 game, the week 16 game against the Rams, where Mike McDonald was talking about taking the training wheels off Walker and letting him go as a lead back. But the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks especially, we have seen a masterful use of both running backs. And that two-headed monster, now that running game seems to be clicking, the offensive line with that new scheme seems to be figuring out exactly how to make this thing work. Ken Walker certainly looks like a guy that you want back. But now, after the running back market dipped a couple of years ago, it's kind of risen back up. Good running backs get about $12 million now in average annual value. I look at the deal that James Cook signed with Buffalo this last offseason after his holdout, 4 years, $48 million, $12 million a year. The Seahawks don't like to do 4-year deals, especially, I would think, with running backs. So I'm going to say a 3-year, $36 million deal. The guaranteed money, not quite sure. It's probably around $20 million. Front-loaded, like they like to do. As I sit here today, I've changed my mind on Ken Walker. I think they're going to try and sign him. But again, very, very similarly to Kobe Bryant and even more similarly to the player I'm about to talk about, I think they're going to try to get this done before free agency starts. Does he want to stay here? Does he want to be here? Does he like the culture? Does he like the organization? Does he like the run first attitude? Seahawks run pass split, best in the league, or the highest towards the run, the highest number of run attempts in the league this year. Is this where he wants to be? If so, is he willing to take a deal before free agency starts, knowing he'd leave some money on the table? If they can do that, they can make this work. If not, if he gets a free agency, he probably is too rich for their blood. And I think the situation is exactly the same with Riq Woolen. Very similar. Early in the season, I was convinced he's not going to be here in 2026. Not Mike McDonald's type of cornerback. Now, I have thought it was unfair the last 2 years, the people that were saying has no interest in defending the run. He can't defend the run. He's not physical. He doesn't want any part of it. That was never the case. You look at his college tape, and he's flying up and laying the wood to guys. He had that shoulder injury his second year, and I think that played with his head a little bit. Then there was a technique issue in moving from Pete Carroll's defense and the way it's coached to Mike McDonald's that Coach Derick from All 22 Films earlier this year talked about his footwork and his technique and how it just seemed to be kind of a mess. Well, that's gotten better. And you know throughout the season that Mike McDonald kept talking about the process with Woolen. And I think what he meant by that was technique. He has been, and then his name was thrown around the trade deadline. His name was involved in talks with the Raiders for Maxx Crosby and potentially others. Since that trade deadline, he has been the best version of himself. He has been remarkable. You don't hear about him during games, which is a good thing because it means he's not getting dumb penalties. And it also means he's just shutting down his side of the field. Devontae Adams had 1 catch for 1 yard in week 11. Tedero McMillan 2 weeks ago had 1 catch for 5 yards. He's shutting receivers down. He's making plays and he's coming up. He made some plays against the 49ers, coming up and hitting people. An 83.2 passer rating against this year. That ranks 10th among corners who have faced 200 snaps or more. His potential contract, I basically put J.C. Horn's deal down there. It would be about the 4th or 5th biggest deal out there. Same age. Horn had the draft pedigree, but didn't really have the production to match it the first few years. Here's why I say this. If you think I'm crazy, Riq Woolen's 26 years old. He's 6'4". He's tall. He's long. He runs a 4.3 40. And he's been productive. He's been a 4-year starter. If he makes the open market, he's getting that deal. I guarantee it. If you disagree with me, bookmark this video, save it, screen record it, whatever. Come back to me later. I will be right. If you don't think Riq Woolen is worth that kind of money, it's just because of some preconceived notion you have and some perception you have based on something you've seen from him up to this point. But if he gets to the open market, he's getting that money. So he fits in that same bucket of, I think the Seahawks want him back. I think they'll try and bring him back. They'll make him an offer. The Seahawks don't dick around. They don't play games. They don't lowball you and then hope you'll take it and then come back and counteroffer. They're straight up with you. Here's what we think you're worth and what we're willing to pay you in our structure. By the way, the Seahawks have $70+ million in cap space next year and the ability to easily get to 100. I've done a show on this before and I'll continue. I'll do a few more once we get deeper into the offseason. They have some really easy levers to pull on some of their high-paid guys. They can get to $100 million in cap space. They can sign all these guys and bring them back and go out and add people from the outside if they want to. Just wanted to get that out of the way and let you know that that's the situation. If you're sitting there thinking, they got to let some of these guys go. All right, I promised you I would give a couple honorable mentions, a couple extras. The first one I'm going to do is Shaheed. Now, why do I call him honorable mention or extra? Because I think it's a given. Like, his agents probably aren't very happy with him. But when he was acquired at the trade deadline, he flat out said, this is where I want to be. I want to be here long term. I expect to do a new deal with them. That indicates to me the organization has already talked to the agent and they have a ballpark. They have an idea what they're looking for and they know they can sign him long term. That's why I didn't include him here. I don't think there's any question here. I'd be shocked if he plays for another organization next year. I think the chances of the Seahawks re-signing him and him staying in Seattle is 90+%. Potential contract. This is a little tricky, but kind of looked around out there, and this is the Jacoby Myers deal. 3 years, $60 million, $30 million guaranteed, though. It's basically wide receiver 2 money. Now, there's some deals out there for players of similar age who you can argue are not wide receiver 1 on their current team. And sometimes the average annual value gets up to $15 million or so. So this could be closer. I'm talking about the guaranteed money, right? Where the guaranteed money would be $45 million, would be closer to $15 million a year. I think they'll figure this one out. I do. And that's why I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just think it's going to get done. And it could get done soon. I would be shocked if Shaheed gets to free agency. I think this deal will be done before March. And then Derick Hall. Now, there's undrafted free agents to be, like the first 3 were, and Shaheed is. And then there's Derick Hall. He is entering into this offseason the 4th year of his rookie deal, the final year. The Seahawks notoriously, famously do not negotiate contracts before there's 1 year left on the deal. That's a Paul Allen thing. And John Schneider has honored that. And so is the owner, Jody, as they move forward. And they've stood fast on that. Remember, Cam Chancellor tried to challenge that, get an extension with 2 years left on his deal. They held their ground. He sat out the first 2 games of the year, and then he came back. I absolutely think Hall will get done. Absolutely. I think he's everything that John Schneider and Mike McDonald want in a Seahawk as a person and in a player. The intensity, the violence, the physicality. And I still think there's some ceiling there. I know he had 10 sacks last year, hasn't translated to as many sacks this year. They're just playing so well as a team. But I think he's got more production ahead of him. And he's a guy that you just don't want to let walk out the door. You absolutely don't. Now, the potential contract can be a little tricky because second defensive ends, and I say second because Uchenna Nwosu's cap hit next year is about $27 million. I kind of consider Leonard Williams in this bucket. I know he's listed as a defensive tackle, but he sort of plays end too. You can kind of lump all those guys together in that same bucket when it comes to the salary cap and how it's broken out positionally. But you look at last offseason, the second best pass rusher on his own team, Gregory Rousseau, got 4 years and $80 million, and George Karlaftis got 4 years and $88 million with $62 million guaranteed. If that's what George Karlaftis got, I think that's kind of what Derick Hall might be in line for. Now, the person that he is, he's probably willing to do this deal early and give up some money. So maybe it's a maybe it's 3 years and closer to 60 million with 35 guaranteed. I mean, that's just totally off the top of my head, but I can see him just absolutely wanting to stay here no matter what and getting that deal done. Now, who's missing? Boye Mafe, for one. I just don't see a reason to sign him for what it would cost to sign him. Some of you might think, oh, let's, get him for cheap, get him on a 1-year prove-it deal. Again, a guy who's 26 years old with those athletic traits, and even though it hasn't translated to sacks, those pressure numbers, how important it is to find pass rushers in this league and how sometimes it can be hard to find. I think Boye Mafe is going to get more on the open market than the Seahawks are willing to pay. I wouldn't be surprised if they make him an offer, but I think any reputable agent would say, no, we're going to test the market, and he'll probably walk. And I'm okay with that. I think you can find someone in the draft or in free agency looking for a bounce back deal. I've talked before about Arnold Ebiketie from the Falcons, who incidentally came out the same year that Boye Mafe did, and the Seahawks had very high on their board, had a very similar grade, if not the same grade as Mafe, had a first-round grade on him, and then the Falcons traded up to 1 pick ahead of the Seahawks and took Ebiketie. The Seahawks ended up taking Hall. Ebiketie's kind of fallen short of expectations in Atlanta. He's going to be a free agent. Maybe they just pivot, and they're like, well, we liked you 4 years ago. Let's see if you can be better than Mafe. And that would be more of like a 1-year deal. But I think they're going to take a big swing at edge as well. I think they're going to redo Nwosu's deal, save a little cap space in 26, extend him because he's healthy now and he's playing at a high level. And I think they're going to take a shot. Is it Trey Hendrickson? Do they try to trade for Maxx Crosby? I think now that Pete's out with the Raiders, they're full-on rebuild now. I think that the move to hire Pete and bring in Geno was thinking they could be competitive now, and I kind of thought they'd have a chance to. I was wrong about that. But I think now it's full rebuild, and Crosby's already frustrated. I think he demands a trade. I think there could be an opportunity there. Jalen Phillips, who there's some kind of mixed signals about whether the Seahawks poked around him at the trade deadline. They did look into his teammate in Miami, Bradley Chubb. But Jalen Phillips has been really good with the Eagles since trade deadline. He's a guy that's out there too. There have been indications that Mike McDonald, kind of behind the scenes, wants a closer. He's never had one. He's made do, even in Baltimore, with like retreads, guys like, Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney and Brent Urban. And he's kind of done that here a little bit, sort of mixing and matching some guys that great at getting pressures, but no dominant pass rusher that you have to game plan for. Indications are that he wants one of those guys. And so, we'll see if he goes out and gets one. What's up, everybody? Good to see you all in here. Jason right off the top said the picture is of Mafe or of Hall, because I was trying to throw a little curveball at you. Not a Mafe. He can go take the pick. Let's talk about comp picks. They're not guaranteed, and you only get them if you sign fewer unrestricted free agents than you lose. And I think the Seahawks, given their cap space and given how targeted they can be about upgrading one particular position, because this roster is so balanced and young and good across all position groups, they can go out. They might be aggressive in free agency. They might go after a Tyler Linderbaum to be an elite center in this offense. They might go out. They might trade for a Maxx Crosby and his cap hit. They might go after a Trey Hendrickson. And so if they go out and sign, simple math, if they lose Riq, Kobe, and Walker, and they all sign big deals, don't get all excited about potentially getting third-round draft picks as comp picks. First of all, you don't get those until 2027. And second of all, if we go then sign 3 unrestricted free agents, it cancels them out and we don't get those comp picks. So don't count on comp picks. They're a bonus. They're absolutely a bonus. CK Seahawks says, don't forget to work in the Crosby contract. That contract for an elite player like he is is unbelievably manageable. The Seahawks can absolutely fit that deal in if they want to go make a deal. And John Schneider has a track record. When he decides he wants a guy, he doesn't give up. Marshawn Lynch, he went after for more than a year. Leonard Williams for 2 years. They tried to trade for Maxx Crosby last offseason. They tried to trade for him at the deadline. They're going to engage the Raiders again this offseason and try to get Maxx Crosby. I guarantee it. Fabrice says, my takes are JSN, Walker, and Woolen Spoon. JSN will not be extended until the year after. He'll get his 5th-year option, as will Devin Witherspoon, and the Seahawks won't extend those guys early. So we'll be having this conversation about them a year from now. Lilbon T3I, restructure Kupp salary for team-friendly cap. This is absolutely one of the moves that I expect to happen. I think Kupp wants to keep playing. I think he wants to be here, but that cap hit next year doesn't make sense for the Seahawks. I think they'll do a restructure, and he'll gladly take a pay cut to stay here. That's my assumption when it comes to Kupp. That's one of the deals. Leonard Williams' deal you can easily borrow some money from. Sam Darnold's deal you can. And I think they'll redo Uchenna Nwosu's deal. That gives you a really good opportunity to free up some money as well. Oli Sasquatch 78 says it's a bit of a gamble paying early because if a player gets injured, the team could be out of that guaranteed money. That's true. There are injury guarantees and there is fully guaranteed money. The Seahawks typically don't fully guarantee a lot of money beyond the second year. So the way they structure contracts are a little bit more protected against devastating injuries than some other teams. But also that's just not how you go about business. You don't approach it from an angle of fear, right? You don't. You try to get the best players in. You don't assume they might get hurt. You don't fear that they might get hurt. Misfit says the Eagles are ridiculous with spending massive money with low cap number first 3 years or so. Envy that oftentimes, but he goes on to say the number of absolutely massive deals they've gotten out of the past few years is bonkers. It's going to catch up with them at some point. And I mentioned this the other night on the show, but if you're thinking, wow, the Seahawks are in good shape financially, cap space for the next few years moving forward, well, then we're going to take control of this division. The Rams and 49ers are in really good shape too. When you look at the teams that have a lot of cap space for next year, they're mostly the bad teams. But the Rams and 49ers are in really good shape with their cap. So this thing that we saw this year with all three of these teams, just, the fight to the finish and how tough it's going to be. Did they all end up splitting? Rams and Niners split. We split with the Niners. Yeah, we all did. We all ended up going, 3 and 3 against each other. Man, my math sucks sometimes. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. These three are going to be good for a long, long time. And now, God dang it, all the reports leading up to today were the Cardinals are going to hang on to Jonathan Gannon, to which I would have said, would have just been doing the rest of the division a favor, but they end up firing him today. So I still don't trust that organization to actually hire a good coach and put a plan in place. They kept the GM who hasn't put good enough talent on the field. So, yeah. Quinn Norwood says, Dan, will you be attending the game? Me and my wife just bought tickets and are coming from Louisiana to support the Hawks. It does not look like I'll be going to either of the home playoff games. It just doesn't make sense. The expense of it and flying out there, just paid for my tickets today. But I've got some people lined up that I know to potentially buy them because I'm going to the Senior Bowl the last week of the month, and it's a financial commitment, and can't do both, can't do all of it. By the way, if you'd like to contribute to the expenses of the Senior Bowl trip, that link is down below in the description also. Sarah asking, could we get Bijan Robinson? I saw him in the Atlanta game and was stunned at his talent. There is absolutely no way Bijan Robinson's getting out of Atlanta. They just fired their coach and their GM. They want to build something there. He's the best running back in the NFL, and he's on a rookie contract. That would be a fireable offense if they let him get out of the building. Oh, you were the one. Okay. Pedro says, hey, Dan, were you surprised that Greg replied to me when I asked about Riq K9 getting a new deal and he said Bryant instead? We're talking about this right here. Yeah. There you go. No, Greg interacts with people. Greg's just a good dude. Love having him on the show. And I should probably try and get him on the show before the next playoff game. Or maybe I'll save it for the NFC Championship game. Right? Yeah, Fabrice says Woolen's going to get paid in free agency. That's why if they do want to bring him back, they're going to have to try and get to a deal early before free agency, because if he hits that open market, he might get $30 million a year, which the guys at the top of the cornerback market are, like Derek Stingley, Sauce Gardner. They're at $30 million a year. He could get that. He could. Yeah, Misfit says Jalen Johnson's 4 for 72 seems reasonable as a starting point, but he'll get more than that in the open market. Absolutely. Fabrice says Crosby will be a Seahawk. Mark my words. Man, I hope you're right. He would be the absolute perfect player from the outside you could bring in. He and Tyler Linderbaum would be. And if, look, you want to talk about fantasy scenarios, if they could sign Tyler Linderbaum, he'd probably become the highest paid center of all time, and trade for Maxx Crosby, then I would let Walker walk, Woolen walk, Bryant walk. I would let all three of those guys walk to make that happen financially, because I would trust them to go out and find another running back to pair with Zach Charbonnet. Never going to count on a guy coming off 2 ACLs, but maybe Ken McIntosh. George Halani's had a hard time staying healthy. I like what we saw from Jacardier Wright in the preseason, but they'd be able to go out and get a guy on a prove-it deal or draft a guy to fit this system. So to get those two moves done, I would let all three of those first guys walk, and you could bring one or two of them back and still make it work. I've run the numbers, but it would just be a little bit trickier. Mike Henderson says, in an interview last year, John laughed off questions about making cap room. John's been around so long. He knows the cap better than anyone. He does. And Joey Lane's really good at this stuff. And he's a little bit more aggressive than his predecessor was, who was at Matt Johnson. And he'll use void years. He's a little bit more creative for the right player. They don't just throw void years out there to anybody like some teams do. But selectively, they'd be willing to. Martin Lawrence basically asked me if I think it makes sense to keep this running back group together for next season. Absolutely, I do. After what I've seen the last couple of weeks, I've watched that game 3 times now from Saturday. Haven't watched the all 22 yet, but I watched the full replay, and then I've watched the condensed replay. Because we did the live watch party, so I didn't get to get the benefit of the broadcast analysis. But that was a masterful example of using both running backs together. Almost the exact same number of touches. Reminded me of those great Carolina teams that had Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams. And they were different styles, kind of similar, where, Charbonnet was more like the Jonathan Stewart, and Walker was more like D'Angelo Williams, kind of a thunder and lightning, fire and ice kind of a deal. And just the way Kubiak's got that dialed in now. Early in the season, it was like, well, we'll use Charbonnet on these kinds of runs and Walker on these kinds of runs. Well, teams figure that out. On Saturday, it was part of the game plan, and it was beautiful, and it kept the 49ers off their toes, or on their toes, and those guys were both great. I think they've really dialed in what each of them do well, and then the offensive line, now that young offensive line, youngest in the league, has started to come together, and now it's all kind of clicking at the same time. Mike Henderson says, who out there do you see as another older defensive free agent that Mike can give life back like he did with D-Law? I think Hendrickson would be that guy. There's some thought out there that he's not ideal for this system because he's not a great run defender. He's better than people give him credit for. He's solid. But he's also such a dynamic, elite pass rusher. He can just flat out beat a guy individually. And we don't really have that guy right now. And so that's why I call him a closer. Like late in games, you'd like to have a guy like that. Now, the question with him is he's 32 years old. How long of a deal does he want? How long of a deal does the market bear? I'm not so worried as much about the average annual value, but if he wants to take like one of those 3-year Seahawk, John Schneider, Joey Lane structured deals where it's, you get a lot of money up front in your first year and then there's no guarantees after that, then he could be a guy that fits that mold. I also really want to know what's going on with Christian Wilkins. Like, what a bizarre, weird situation to go from like an elite player who gets paid a record-setting amount of money and then almost immediately is out because of injury and some weirdness in the locker room. He had a reputation before that as a great locker room guy and a great leader. It has been radio silence since the Raiders let him go. And some of that might be because, there's a grievance and between he and the Raiders, and maybe they want to get that behind him, or maybe it's the foot injury and it's that complicated. And maybe it's going to be something he has to battle, and maybe he'll never be the same. But if Christian Wilkins is out there and is willing to do a 1-year deal to just try and prove himself again, that might make some sense. I know a lot of you think that defensive tackle is not a need. It absolutely is. Jaron Reed's going to be 33. We don't know what Riley Mills is yet. Mike Morris is what he is. He's not going to develop into anything more. And Byron Murphy's having to play way too much at nose tackle. He's doing a great job at it, but that's not where you want him. You want him at 3-tech full time. They need to get another interior defensive tackle that can play some 0-and-1 technique, at least rotating with Murphy or maybe playing it full time. And that's not really Wilkins' game. He's similar to Murphy in that he can play that, but he also can penetrate and be a 3-tech. They absolutely need to add to defensive tackle this offseason, whether it's just as a veteran journeyman run stuffer or this is a good drive. You've heard about how bad this draft is. Don't listen to it. Don't listen to it. Every draft has its strengths. It's just a matter of finding the right fit. And this draft does have a strong interior defensive line group and some real true nose tackles all the way from the first round, all the way through the first 3 where the Seahawks have 3 picks. So if you believe, or if anyone tries to tell you that defensive tackle doesn't make sense for the Seahawks this offseason, they're wrong. Period. Let's see. Martin says, if we could guarantee getting either Crosby or Linderbaum, I would take Linderbaum. Crosby would elevate the defense, but the impact Linderbaum would have on the offense would be greater. Here's where I stand on Linderbaum. I'm okay doing nothing at center this offseason. I think Jalen Sundell and Olu Oluwatimi have shown themselves both to be starter caliber centers in this league. But I've always said that Sundell has the higher ceiling because of his athletic ability, and he's getting better every week since he came back off the injured list. He played his best game as a pro on Saturday against the 49ers. As I'm watching the replays of that game, he's everywhere. On a lot of those long runs, he's downfield at the second level, blowing guys up. I think Jalen Sundell is a really good starting center in this league. If you can get, he's not Tyler Linderbaum, and if you can get Linderbaum, you do it. But here's where I am on that. If you go out and you sign Tyler Linderbaum, then you probably don't add another guard because you can move Sundell over there. Remember early in the year when Mike McDonald said the plan, if anything should happen to one of the guards, would have been bring in Oluwatimi back to the pivot and move Sundell out to one of the guards, right? Well, I think ideally in a perfect world, the Seahawks want a more stout, physical guard, a guy that can just blow people off the ball. And so I don't know that that would be the exact move. If you were to sign a Tyler Linderbaum, you might see Anthony Bradford being the starting right guard again next year, and that would be okay for 2 reasons, because Bradford has improved significantly this year. He still has the bad reps, but don't focus on those. But also, if you put him between Lucas and an elite center, that makes everything better too. Or Christian Haynes could be the guy, or Bryce Cable do. It gives you a little more margin for error where you can maybe break one of those younger guys in there. I really like Cable Dew's upside. He's a tremendous athlete, and he's much bigger than Haynes. So, I mean, obviously Mike McDonald knows Linderbaum. He's an Ohio kid. I think he's from the Midwest. So I don't know if he'd be willing to, play out here on the West Coast or not, but I would imagine they'll poke around on that, but it's probably a pipe dream to get Linderbaum, in which case, I would revisit I would roll with Sundell next year and revisit the Cesar Ruiz idea. They tried to trade for him before the trade deadline, see if maybe the New Orleans Saints would be willing to part with him. His cap hits $9.5 million the next couple of years. I was watching their game yesterday. I was watching him on every play. And while he hasn't really lived up to that first round reputation, there are Saints fans who think he's been a disappointment because he hasn't been a dominant player. But I was watching him yesterday, and he's good. He's better than Bradford. And he'd be enough better than Bradford, if that verbiage makes sense, that it would be worth going out and making that move. So I think those are just a couple of opportunities there. All right, you guys, that was it. I just wanted to kind of present that to you today and get that list out there. Again, just a reminder, let's go here, that all three of the boys from the Seahawkers podcast are going to be joining me tomorrow night, 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern. We're going to go live on that. We're just kind of get their thoughts on the 49ers game and where they see this team going. It'll be kind of a wide-ranging conversation, and because we'll be live, we'll be able to take your questions and comments as well. In the meantime, if you would subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up, really helps me as an independent full-time content creator. This is what I do for a living. The other ways that you can help support me are listed and linked down below in the description, including a direct link for you to contribute specifically to expenses related to going down to the Senior Bowl for a week in Mobile at the end of the month and starting to ramp up for draft season. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Forever and always go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys.